the way to understand it and the way to go about it is to empty the mind of that which doesn't serve, that which is not true.
Yeah.
And when you do that, then you create all this space, this vacuum, and then you have to be very careful what will enter the vacuum. So you create a vacuum, and then you consciously say, I want life force, I want intelligence to fill this vacuum. I want the supreme knowledge to fill this vacuum. So you empty and then you let it fill. Same thing with the body. You empty it, you empty the rubbish, and then what you invite in is the green vegetable juice and the raw salads and the bee pollen and all these really good things. So the life force floods the body, and then this restructuring takes place, and it just knows, because these substances are what's called adaptogenic. They know what's needed, and they have the information of millennia, and they can come in and restore everything. So it's not even that you need to unlearn and then it takes time. It's the degree to which you're able to, and this is hard for most people. That's why it doesn't happen every day to everyone. But if a person can release that which is not truth and allow that empty space to be filled with that which is life-generating, that which is filled with life force, which will have in it the intelligence that's required, that will start to rework and rewire everything. So very quickly, you'll see that your dreams will have more meaning. You'll have premonitions. You'll be able to pick up on people and whether they're good for you or not. You'll be able to actually, without necessarily visibly seeing their makeup, you'll know their makeup. And without even knowing why you know things, you'll just know. And that's part of the intelligence coming back to you. I love that you asked this. I think absolutely. And that's why I have the projects I do are all education-based, because my goal is to, you used to say it's like the Harvard of detox, but it's so much more than that. It's a school of power. It's giving you the tools for a life of power. And you could never get that in a textbook or in a classroom per se, a mainstream classroom. And in fact, it's really quite difficult to piece together all of the things. It's taken me a lifetime to put all this together, and of questing, and I feel like I've been able to put it all together in a way that I can hand it to anyone and say, here, you don't have to do all of the searching. It's been done for you. The best has been pulled out. Here's what you need. Here, you can restore yourself with this, and to take that time. So the Life of Power is a year-long course, and it's essentially designed to be like a higher learning, and for something that will actually completely restore you to your power. And then you can decide what you really want to do with your life, and it might be quite different to what you might have thought you wanted to do at the time, because if you're aligning with something that's has greater intelligence than just what you're offered in the world. Having said that, to be someone with this knowledge working in banking, in the legal world, in corporate America, is a really remarkable gift that one can give of their perspective in those places that wouldn't ordinarily have people with that kind of perspective there, and it can bring a huge amount of light to those places and change. It's so dramatic, I can't even begin. Let me put it to you this way: I would not want to live in a world without this knowledge. I would be completely disempowered. I was completely disempowered. I was clueless, even though I had a degree, a university degree from NYU. Even though I went to a top, one of the most elite boarding schools in America. Even though I have traveled extensively, none of those things gave me the knowledge that would enable me to understand life and to make truly healthy choices, at large, on every level. To be liberated, to be a free human being. Okay, let me put it this way. None of those things would have given me the ability to be sovereign. This knowledge makes one sovereign. And who wants to live in a world where because the opposite of sovereignty is enslavement. So you're either a slave or you're sovereign. And there's of course the journey from being the slave to becoming sovereign, which is what I like to guide people. That's really what I'm teaching, what I'm doing with all this. But you cannot get sovereignty, and I think that's That's exactly what you're getting at with this whole MBA thing or whatever it is, higher learning in any form. Unless it's making you sovereign, you're going to be a slave, and then you're going to be doing the work of somebody else. You're going to be following the directives of somebody else, and and those somebody else's are not for your highest good. They're existing and developing plans, programs, schemes, nefarious plans to take your energy. They want to feed off of you, and it's not to say that, like, everything out there has this deliberate motivation to do so. Often it's unconscious, just because the people who are coming out of it, they're born from it, don't know any other way. That's how they see the world, and so that's what they do. But until you start to see it differently, until you become sovereign and understand how not only how your kingdom, what's necessary for your kingdom to thrive, but how much other people deserve to know how to make their kingdom thrive, and how much we all thrive when there are more people with thriving kingdoms, then suddenly life starts to make sense, because no one is truly going to be successful when others are suffering, because we are ultimately, with the human body, we mustn't think about the human body as our body. The human body is the collective body. That is the human body. And so we're not ever going to be well until everyone's well. There's this sense that there's work to be done here, that, like, we've chosen to come to this planet at this time to, one, to help our souls grow, because by doing the right thing in difficult circumstances, we grow enormously. It's incredible. It's like so that might be a big reason that we've all come here when we have. But it also means that we need to help inspire each other to be strong and to do the right thing under difficult circumstances, so that we accomplish our goal here. Because I don't think we came here for selfish reasons. And then the other reason, and I often think about this, I'll go into kind of a visualization, not deliberately, but just sort of like almost like a memory of seeing the earth and humanity and all of life in this situation, these dire circumstances that it's been in for many, many generations, for eons. And you look down and you say, if I can just maintain my clarity, I can help fix that. I can be a part of the solution. And so you dive down, and you then the second you dive in, and your theta brain waves are receiving all the recordings, and you wind up getting stuck in the same situation a bit. But if you can keep your clarity, or you can come back to clarity, or when you restore yourself, you get that again. You're like, wait a minute, I did decide to come in here because I did believe I could help things. And with clarity, my clarity is so much bigger than the cultural folly. So of course I can fix this. I just need to stay courageous and make the choices that are aligned with that every minute of the day. And and then there we are. It's like we remember why we came, and then it becomes so much easier to do the work that we came to do. I think these kids are coming in with a lot more, they're higher consciousness. And maybe it's because there's such a huge need in the unseen world. They know how much Earth needs help, and so they're maybe letting us keep more of our consciousness as we come into the world. And the younger generation, they call them the indigo kids, the star children, the rainbow kids. Maybe they've been allowed to come in and retain more of their clarity and consciousness. But there definitely is a shift, and I also think that there's a dramatic division at the moment now, where it's like those who came to be conscious, to help rectify the imbalances in the world and to set things straight are
You got
lots of visitors are really, really doing it decisively, and lots of visitors. And those who are really not going to wake up at this time are allowing themselves to get even more deeply hypnotized. I like the word you use, legacy. Legacy of accumulation. I've never put it quite that way before. Thank you. So what the colonic will do is it will remove the matter that's in the large intestine, in the center of the intestine, if it's a thorough colonic, which will be about the equivalent of 12 bowel movements. So it's not insignificant. There we go. So it will get what's in the center. But what people don't understand, and they'll often say, well, I went for a colonoscopy and they showed me that my tissue in my colon is pink and healthy. So where is all this waste you talk about? Well, it's in the tissue, and that's why it appears to be pink and healthy and clean and clear, but that's just because when they take the preparation substance for the colonoscopy, it's removing that which is in the center. In fact, you can go for colonic instead of taking the magnesium citrate to remove the waste in the center in preparation for the colonoscopy. They'll do the same thing, but the magnesium citrate is very harsh. Anytime you take, so there's a big difference between a laxative and colon irrigation. Anything that's laxative is going to irritate the intestinal walls, and the reason you have this release, the reason you expunge the waste matter is because it basically it's a reaction. It's like the colon is flinging it out and flinging it off. It's like trying to get rid of it because it's such an irritant. So the irritation of the laxative causes the expulsion of the waste. You don't want to irritate your intestine. You want to love your cells and your tissues. You want to look after them. That's why we gently put the water in, let it saturate the waste matter, let it pull it up and out, let the alkalinity in the substances you're consuming, your green juices, your salads, lift that waste matter up and out of the cells and tissues in a gentle, loving way, harmoniously with the body, helping it. Whereas a laxative of any kind is just going to, the release you have with the laxative is just a result of irritation. So going back to the colonoscopy, where is all this waste, going back to the legacy of accumulation, what happens is once you're able to empty what's in the center of the colon, that's creating a vacuum. And this is where things get really exciting. So that vacuum is going to suck the waste that's deeper in the tissues toward the center. And then when that's full, you have another colonic. And then you have a vacuum, and then you suction that waste. And that's how you systematically remove the waste from deep, deep, deep throughout your very, very porous body. It's the mechanics of cleansing. Yeah. You're actually creating the conditions for a vacuum. The vacuum's doing the cleaning just like it does in any sort of vacuum, and then you're able to release. So we awaken, we release, we have a vacuum, we suction, we release, we awake, we just repeat, rinse and repeat. And basically, it's like taking your body and soaking it in the soap and wringing it out, and soaking it in the soap and wringing it out, and eventually you're going to be clean again. And you're gonna. And what cleanliness means, I think we talked about it yesterday. Cleanliness is aliveness. It will be full of life, not sanitized. Not sterilized, but it will be replete with life force, because you've created the space. You've removed that which is not life force so that life force can enter. People are so afraid of empty space. But, if you think about the atom itself, it's mostly empty space. The analogy, the equivalent illustration is if you had an atom, if an atom was a football field, the proton would be a football in the center of the football field, and then the perimeter of the football field, let's say it's it's spherical, just even though we know it's not, is the outer shell, the outer belt of the atom, which is where the electrons are, and that space between the proton in the nucleus, the protons in the nucleus, and the electrons on the outer belt on the perimeter, it's all empty space. We're supposed to be mostly empty space, but what we do, we're taught from the beginning, is to fill ourselves up. Have a filling big breakfast. Some porridge. Put some meat on your bones. No, take some meat. Get some space, and then what will grow on you will be really healthy, powerful muscle. I mean, remember, we're not emptying ourselves to be weak. We're emptying ourselves to be strong, to have the wherewithal to go and move the body in such a way that everything wakes up, that which has been rendered dormant takes on the life that it was designed to have, and then suddenly we have these bodies that are able to flex and move and bend and lift and twist and dance, and be euphoric like a child, as opposed to these calcified bodies of, that we're used to seeing, just even, after 10, 12 years old in today's world. And kids aren't even walking and moving the way they did 20, 30 years ago. They're barely moving between the remote control and the games and their phones and their headphones and everything. And they're just, it's basically shutting out that which is alive and filling the body. When we're exposed to things visually, audibly, all of our senses are constantly taking in what we're exposed to. And when we're exposed to things in nature, we're talking about the alkaline, highly negatively ionically charged substances. They conduct; they don't stick. The positively ionically charged substances, the acidic stuff, it sticks, it clogs us, and that's the difference. So nature, everything flows, everything conducts. In the unnatural world, everything just gets clogged and it's like a hoarding. It's like it never moves because there's nothing kinetic about it. There's no life force in it. It's dead. So if we're surrounding ourselves with dead things, what do we think is going to happen to us? It's definitely not going to have the result of being alive, because it's impossible. Cause and effect. Every choice you make, if it's aligned with that which is life generating, you're going to become more and more life generating. You're going to embody the life generating force. And that's what's so exciting, is to actually imagine yourself. If you want to have a vision, we talked about vision leads to choices that we make, and the choices lead to the effect. So the vision, to envision yourself as the embodiment of the life force, is a pretty rock solid way to get there. When we talk about eating disorders at large, what I like to remind everybody about, and remind me if I've said this before, because it's an important topic, but I don't want to repeat myself, but to have an eating disorder is to eat chaotically. To have a disorder is to be out of order. To be out of order is to be in chaos. The opposite of chaos is order. So when people are suffering with eating disorders, they need to know two things. They are on a quest for order. They want to actually bring their chaos to order. And they need to understand that the world that they're in is all eating disordered too. It's just not a textbook definition of eating disorder. They are eating chaotically, haphazardly. They are eating in disorder. So they're both eating disorders. And what we need to help the textbook eating disordered person, and anyone who's eating disordered, understand, is that this desire for order can be taken into a very functional direction, because what we're really trying to do, I call it the angelic work, is taking things that are in chaos and bringing them to functional order. Functional order is how life operates. Life is always moving from, if it's given the right conditions, it's going from order to higher order and higher order. That's what evolution is. That's how we get better. That's how things. So the more life force there is, the more God force, primal power, whatever you want to call it, prana, chi, the more of that there is, and the more that congregates, the more intelligence floods the system, and so things get to up level and up level and up level to no end point. I mean, it's the intelligence just increases constantly. So anyone who's suffering from anorexia, bulimia, orthorexia, any sort of overeating, whatever it is, being especially meticulous OCD eating, whatever you want to, however it's manifesting, it's not wrong to be looking to want to apply order to your intake. It's actually right to want to do that. In our natural state, we would eat in a really ordered way. We might not think of the hunter-gatherers as eating in an ordered way, but they were, and they were in natural alignment with the cycles of their body, the cycles of nature. There was only order. So this kind of mixing of all sorts of substances on the same plate, the buffets, the salad bars, even you take a smoothie and you're just putting a mishmash of stuff together. Does that really belong together? And maybe, probably not. It's all very natural. To be able to have the discipline to embark on ordering your intake is actually a very mature, well-directed thing to do. But if you're doing it unconsciously, and if you're doing it with your shadow stuff, and you haven't developed good boundaries in your life, it's probably not going to have the result you're subconsciously even searching for. It's going to keep you in pain, in cycles of pain and suffering. So what we want to do is we want to help people order their lives at large, see where their blind spots are, see where their shadow is, see where their boundaries are broken. And often it's also coupled with a desire for control. So to be in functional control is actually to be sovereign. You're in control of your kingdom. Okay, so your boundaries are good and all of this, and there's order in your kingdom. There's order in the court. We talked about that yesterday. Order in the court. So control and order can be functional and they can be dysfunctional. What we want to help people do is create functional order and functional control in their lives, so that they become a life-generating force. You can't actually embody the life force. You can't flood yourself with good until you create boundaries around that which should not be there, which are good being life-generating, good, bad, life-generating, life-deteriorating, better terms for it. So you can't really get anywhere in terms of being in a space of empowerment in your life without functional order and functional control. But mostly, and so it's a bit, I think, going back to your question, it sounds like it's a little bit of about how to deal with shame, how to deal with like coming out about you with your with your what could be seen as handicaps, imbalances. You know, everyone in the modern world has a crutch, and we pretzel into position because we actually can't spread our wings and breathe freely and be who we are, because we're told, no, that's not okay, and you're not good enough here, and you know, and then, you know, your boundaries are broken, all these things happen. So we become like, you know, like contorted. And so everyone has their own way of contorting. So anorexia is one way of contorting. Bulimia is another way of contorting. Becoming an alcoholic is another way of contorting. Being a people pleaser and having your life force siphoned off constantly and you know, sort of balancing that out with eating chocolate chip cookies is another way of contorting. There's many ways of contorting as there are ideas in existence. So we will just take on that which appeals to us for whatever reason. Maybe we were exposed to it before, maybe we've seen an example of it. Maybe we thought that that person was super cool in their sort of rebellion, the rebellion program, I call it, because you know, if you're going to eat, drink, smoke, and go crazy, you're actually not free. You're not actually rebelling against society. You're adhering to it and putting on one of its outfits. So maybe you saw the rebellion program and you thought that that looked like a good way to contort, because at least the guy looked cool doing it. You know, you could look like Clint Eastwood, or you could look like Rebel Without a Cause. What was his name? James Dean. Right? You could look badass while you were contorting, and that at least, you know, you felt like was a little bit cool. But that's of course a trap. So first of all, we want to eat in peace. Really important to be comfortable where you're sitting, to be happy with where you are, to feel good inside your being, and not just to eat because it's time to eat, or because, you know, be at peace if you're going to eat. And then chewing your food well becomes easier to do because you're not focused on a million different things. You're certainly not in a rush. Never eat when you're in a rush. Skip the meal. It's okay. Have it later, you know? It's not going to nourish you if it's eaten when you're feeling stressed or a rush. And then this idea, it's mastication is sort of an official term for it, the technical term. So one of the reasons that people, there's so many things to address there. It's such an interesting question. So first of all, most people's intestine is compromised. Most people's intestines are compromised. So when they eat, they need to make the food as digestible as possible, because the intestine's already going to struggle. So make the food easy to digest. Also, a lot of people today have had surgeries on different organs on their intestines, so they might not have, you know, their whole gallbladder or their whole pancreas or their whole intestine. And with people like that specifically, you want to create a dietetic regimen that is built around what's called pre-masticated substances. Now that sounds horrible. Pre-masticated, like pre-chewed? That sounds weird. That basically means blended. So that's where blended salads, really smooth blended soups, smoothies are really helpful to people. So the idea of a smoothie or a blended soup or a blended salad, it will make that meal so much more digestible.
Okay.
So it's very important to chew your food well, and for people who have really compromised systems, having their food be largely pre-masticated will enable them to strengthen in ways they would never be able to, and recover and be restored in ways they wouldn't be able to if they kept eating in a normal fashion, let's say, in a non-pre-masticated fashion. It's a lot easier to break down.
Okay.
Anytime you relieve the burden of digestion on the body, the meal will go through much more quickly. It will be assimilated more readily, which means you'll get more nutrient value. And it will enable the body, when the body is not busy digesting, all that energy can go toward healing and doing the work that it's waiting to do. It's always acting on a triage system. It's always waiting for the opportunity to do the big work. So if you need big work done internally, I think it was Hippocrates that said that fasting is laying your body on nature's operating table. And I love that concept, because even if you're not fasting, whenever you're resting from digestion or easing digestion in any way, you're giving that team of internal surgeons, your real surgeons, a chance to do the work that's needed, and of course, any any repair work that's being done there will have hugely beneficial results and increasingly beneficial results. I think there's more suffering now. People might not admit it, but the reason I do what I do is because of human suffering. I would say suffering at large, because obviously, the ecosystems, the plants, the animals are all suffering. But if we can get humans right and get them in alignment, they won't do the things that are causing the suffering for everybody else or for all the other living things. But the reason I do this work is because the suffering is unbearable. I mean, I can't live and be happy and just go about my comfortable life knowing that people are in pain. And having experienced that pain myself so intensely, it's not okay. It's just not okay. And people won't talk about it. They'll behind closed doors, they'll be in acute pain, and they'll be using their crutches, whatever they are. They'll be pretzeling into all the different things they pretzel into. They'll be taking their pills and drinking their alcohol and stuffing themselves with food, and feeling like they're in complete despair, while on the outside, on their social media and on the streets and in their places of work, they will look completely pulled together and as if they've got the whole gig sorted. And they don't. And they just need somebody to even, just kind of whisper, even behind those closed doors, even better. Like, I know you're suffering. And it's no surprise that you're suffering. It's not your fault. You came into a culture, you came into a world scenario that sets you up for suffering. And so, without any shame, let's just start to rectify the situation. So you don't have to go and carry this anymore, because you have a far more interesting makeup and so much more to give, and so much creativity that's just suppressed underneath all of that. It's kind of like, it goes back to everything always comes back to a colon analogy. People often ask, but what about the good flora? Aren't you getting rid of the good flora when you're washing it with the water? No. People's intestines have, there's so many layers of what can be equated to a kind of like a cement on top of all of that. Think of it like a landfill on top of a beautiful garden. So over time, that garden has been suppressed by all this garbage, all this, these heaps of heavy metals and plastics and styrofoam and you name it, and concrete, or like the beautiful earth that's underneath the parking lot. What's that song? They paved paradise, put up a parking lot. It's kind of similar thing. So beneath all of that is all this life. All these little microbes, all they want to do is become the most beautiful flowers you've ever seen, the most fabulously strong, glorious trees for the birds to come to, and for life to gather around, and for streams to grow in. It's like when the wolves were reintroduced to Yellowstone National Park. Everything came back to life. But where there's suppression, it's incredible. It's an amazing story. So where there's suppression of life, which is when people are walking around pretending that everything is fine when it's not fine, beneath that is where the gold is. And by showing people that their suffering is not their doing, the continuation of it is if they become aware and they don't do the right things. We have to do the right thing under tough circumstances. I said this before. But to help them see that is usually their ticket to feeling better about themselves genuinely. Like, oh, I see now. I see how I got tied up into these patterns. I see how I wasn't taught proper boundaries. I see how I never got a chance from birth to become a strong, mature man or woman because this culture had its way with me. It actually violated me. And so now that I see that, and I have the tools to put myself back together, and a great support network, because there are a lot of people who have done it and are doing it now. We have a whole world of people in the Institute who are willing to help and have been there and are incredible voices of how this comes back together and works to help them. And once they start to get a foothold in, everything will start to change, and then we can see who they really are, because we have these personality selves that are covering us up completely. We're actually so afraid of even meeting ourselves. Forget about the rest of the world seeing who we are. We're afraid of meeting ourselves. Again, I think it was Maya Angelou that said that our greatest fear is not that we are so impotent, or I'm going to paraphrase, but that we're actually so powerful and so great that our light would be blinding. And we can't even comprehend our own light, much less get a chance to see it, unless we do this restoration work and become emboldened to see what's really there and know that there's a space for it. Know that there's a world that's looking forward to seeing it, not just suppressing it again. Because what happens is we get suppressed time and time again. The last thing we're going to do is come out like a gopher and be like, well, is it spring yet, and then whatever, the hail comes back down, like, no, it's still winter, okay, not coming out again for a long time. It's like, come out, let's have a look at you. Yeah. It's suppression. It's suppression of truth, and they're usually taking it because, again, their boundaries were infiltrated, and they were asked to accept things that were unacceptable to the human spirit. And then when the human spirit gets that suppressed, and their truth has no space, is not welcome in the world that doesn't understand it, doesn't want it, can't look at it because it would reveal everything that's wrong with the culture and wrong with the world. Then they know that they can't actually be who they are. I think a lot of these the things that we're seeing in today's world, people's personalities that they're justifying as their various identities, without saying too much. They identify as this, identify as that. Well, wait a second. Let's pull back some of the concrete that's been put on top of you, and let's see if maybe you're just identifying that because it's your only option. You're given like this really small spectrum of, if you're a little bit eccentric, then you must be on this spectrum of identifying in these 6 ways. Yeah. So choose one, and then be quiet about it. Just go be that thing and deal with the consequences of that thing, but you're still not getting to know who you are. So it's actually, once again, it's another offense against the human spirit. And so we shouldn't necessarily be celebrating the idea of somebody realizing that they're identifying with a specific type, because that's just reinforcing something else, another straitjacket, another place for them to be pigeonholed and stuck, as opposed to saying, oh, you're not fitting into this world? Well, you don't have to identify with one of these things just because that's all you see. Let's see what you really are, because there is many things to identify with as there are human beings on the planet, because we're each a unique expression of the divine. So let's see what are you really, not which one of these things are you going to choose to be because you saw it on on American Idol or something, just because you saw it on High School Musical. It's like, that's an option. I don't fit in, so I must be, I saw that guy on High School Musical, I'm kind of like him, Don't buy into that. If you're if you're not able to identify with what culture has offered to you, then like then you have something really big inside. It means that you're like your soul wants to express on a level. You're not asleep. You're not hypnotizable. So don't allow yourself to be put in a position where you feel you need to be hypnotized by something that maybe feels a little bit alternative, so you're okay with that because it's not the norm. But it is the norm, because the alternatives they're giving you are norm alternatives. It's like the rebel program, you know? We want to be safe, because one of our greatest fears, of course, is being abandoned by the tribe or being extricated from the community. It's primal. We want to be included because actually what's important to understand is that love is an inclusive energy. So another thing that our culture does is it wants to make you feel like exclusivity is a good thing. But it's not. To be exclusive is to shut people out and to be in a culture that will ultimately shut you out just as readily. Inclusivity, Ubuntu, interconnected life, it's all one. To break it all up is exactly what culture does. It says, well, you know, serve yourself, figure out what you need. And that's all the opposite. It's antithetical to life. It's antithetical to inclusivity, which is what love is. And life force, intelligence, and love are the exact same thing. They're all just different qualities and ways of pulling out what the qualities are within the bigger picture of that life force power and energy. So we are connected by these amazing cords, these golden cords of love. But if we cut them off, then we never experience them. So what we wind up having is very dysfunctional love, this dysfunctional neediness, which, you know, makes one wide open for the narcissist, who's also needy because they need to feed, because they don't have any real love coming to them. They didn't have it growing up. It's all a result of disconnection, and the inability, due to exclusivity versus inclusivity, of the inability of love being able to flow as it should.